The HOA president thought she could throw a party at my remote cabin while I was out of town. Little did she know, I was watching every move from my hidden cameras, and I'd spent 3 months turning that place into a legal nightmare for trespassers. When Melissa Henderson's white Escalade pulled up to my grandfather's cabin, with 5 other cars following behind, I knew she was about to hand me everything I needed to destroy her corrupt little empire. The sound of gravel crunching under multiple sets of tires echoed through my security system as she jimmied my front door lock, not realizing every second was being recorded in crystal-clear 4K resolution. What would you do if you caught your HOA president throwing parties at your property without permission? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. My name's Jake Morrison, and 6 months ago I thought moving to Pine Valley Estates would give me the peace I needed after my divorce. I'm an electrical contractor, 42 years old, and I'd just inherited my grandfather's cabin, about 45 minutes outside the subdivision. That cabin wasn't just property to me. It was where Grandpa taught me to fish, where I proposed to my ex-wife, and the only place left that felt like home. Pine Valley seemed perfect at first. 200 homes, well-maintained, the kind of place where people actually wave when you drive by. The HOA fees were steep at $350 a month, but the previous president, Mr. Chen, was reasonable. Then he moved to Florida, and Melissa, the Marshall Henderson, got elected on a platform of raising community standards. Melissa was everything you'd expect from a power-hungry HOA president. 38, perfectly manicured nails that never touched actual work, drove a white Escalade that sparkled like a diamond, and married to City Councilman Brad Henderson. She carried a clipboard everywhere and measured grass height with an actual ruler. I'm not kidding, I watched her do it, to Mrs. Patterson's lawn while the 80-year-old woman stood there apologizing for her negligence. My first taste of Melissa's brand of justice came 3 weeks after she took office. I opened my mailbox to find a violation notice printed on thick, legal-looking paper that left my fingers smudged with fresh toner. Unapproved structure modification, it read. $500 fine. The crime: installing security cameras on my cabin. My cabin that wasn't even in HOA territory. I knocked on Melissa's door that evening, the smell of her aggressive perfume hitting me before she even opened it fully. Mrs. Henderson, I think there's been a mistake. My cabin's outside your jurisdiction. She stood there in her doorway, lipstick leaving marks on her coffee cup as she sipped, and looked me up and down like I was something unpleasant she'd stepped in. Everything affects property values, Mr. Morrison. Those cameras could overlook neighbors' properties. The nearest neighbor is 2 miles away through thick pine forest. The appearance of surveillance creates an atmosphere of distrust in our community. The click of her high heels on the porch tiles sounded like a judge's gavel as she stepped closer. Remove them or face legal action. That's when I knew this wasn't about cameras or property values. This was about control, and Melissa Henderson had decided I needed to be controlled. 2 days later, Melissa showed up at my main house with what she called her HOA compliance team. 2 other board members carrying clipboards and wearing expressions like they were conducting a raid on a meth lab. She demanded entry for an interior inspection based on an anonymous complaint about possible code violations. I'm sorry, but I don't consent to any inspection, I told her, recording the conversation on my phone. Then we'll be forced to place a lien on your property. Her team rustled papers importantly behind her, the sound of clipboards giving them an official air they definitely didn't deserve. Here's the thing about HOA boards. They count on homeowners not knowing their rights. Most HOA bylaws don't actually permit interior inspections without cause, and anonymous complaints require documentation that includes specific violations and proper notice procedures. The takeaway? Always research your HOA's actual legal authority before letting them intimidate you into compliance. After they left, I spent the evening researching. Turns out there was no anonymous complaint. Melissa was fishing, hoping I'd cave to pressure. But I also discovered something more disturbing. She'd tried the same tactics on Mrs. Patterson 6 months earlier. The elderly widow had paid $2,000 in fake fines rather than fight. I started documenting everything. Every phone call recorded, every interaction logged with timestamps. I filed a formal complaint with the State Housing Authority and began reaching out to other residents. What I found made my blood boil. 3 other families had similar stories. The Rodriguezes were fined for excessive outdoor decorations. Their crime was hanging a Puerto Rican flag during Heritage Month. The Johnsons got hit with noise violations for their teenage son practicing trumpet during permitted afternoon hours. Each family paid, rather than fight, not knowing they were being scammed. The mini twist came when I learned about Melissa's pattern. She specifically targeted people she thought wouldn't fight back: elderly residents, minorities, single parents, anyone who might not have the resources or knowledge to challenge her authority. She was a predator in a perfectly pressed blazer. My counterpunch was simple but effective. I created a shared digital folder and invited every victim to contribute their documentation. Within a week, we had a paper trail showing systematic harassment disguised as rule enforcement. I called us the Pine Valley Truth Squad, and we were just getting started. The smell of fresh ink from my printer working overtime became a familiar scent in my home office as we compiled evidence. Mrs. Patterson brought over a shoebox full of violation notices, her weathered hands shaking slightly as she finally found the courage to fight back. "I thought I was alone," she whispered. "I thought I was just a troublemaker." "No, ma'am," I told her. "You're a victim, but we're going to fix that." Melissa's response to our organizing was swift and vicious. 7 violation notices appeared in my mailbox over 5 days, each more ridiculous than the last. Excessive outdoor lighting for my motion sensors, unauthorized gardening for my vegetable patch, improper waste disposal for my compost bin, total fines $3,500, due in 10 days or face legal action. But while Melissa was busy manufacturing violations, I was reviewing security footage from my cabin. That's when I spotted her white Escalade on my private road. Not once, but 3 times in 2 weeks. The distinctive chrome wheels were unmistakable in the footage, and I realized she'd been photographing my property, building a case for something bigger than harassment. My attorney, Sandra Reeves, specialized in HOA disputes and had seen it all. She took one look at my violation notices and laughed. Actually laughed. "Half of these aren't even real rules, Jake. She's making up violations faster than she can write them." That's when Sandra discovered the real bombshell. Melissa had been creating emergency bylaws without proper board votes, a violation of state law that requires 30-day notice to all residents before any rule changes. The takeaway? HOA boards cannot create rules retroactively or without following proper legislative procedures. But the financial angle was even more interesting. Sandra's investigation revealed $45,000 in consulting fees paid to Melissa's real estate company over 6 months. The landscaping contracts, all awarded to her husband's construction firm. We weren't just looking at harassment, we were looking at embezzlement. The Truth Squad grew to 12 households as word spread. Each family brought documentation of suspicious fines and rule enforcement. Mrs. Patterson revealed she'd kept copies of everything. Her Depression-era mindset of save every receipt becoming our greatest asset. The texture of worn business cards passed between neighbors felt like underground resistance materials as we built our network. Melissa's desperation was showing. She started driving by my house multiple times daily, leaving increasingly unhinged voicemails about property seizure and community protection. When her husband Brad called me directly with a friendly warning about backing down, I knew we were getting close to something that scared them. The mini twist came through Carol Winters, one of Melissa's board allies who approached me secretly at the grocery store. "She's planning something big," Carol whispered, looking around nervously. "Something about declaring your cabin abandoned and seizing it for HOA use. She needs 90 days to make it happen, but she's convinced she can do it." My counterpunch was already in motion. I'd hired Sandra to file a harassment lawsuit, but now we expanded it to include conspiracy and fraud charges. Every fake fine, every made-up rule, every financial irregularity was documented in a legal filing that would make Melissa's life very complicated. The smell of coffee during our late-night Truth Squad meetings became as familiar as the taste of justice we were all craving. We weren't just fighting for our individual rights anymore, we were fighting for our community's soul. Melissa's next move was pure desperation disguised as social media warfare. She created a Facebook group called Pine Valley Community Watch and began posting photos of my property with inflammatory captions like, "Unstable new resident threatens neighborhood safety," and "Armed compound discovered in family community." Armed compound. My vegetable garden and security cameras had become a terrorist training facility in Melissa's twisted narrative. The photos were carefully angled to make my modest improvements look sinister. My workshop became a weapons manufacturing facility. My backup generator was suspicious military equipment. Even my garden gnome made the list as a threatening display of armed aggression. I'm not kidding, she actually photographed my gnome and posted it with warnings about my mental state. But while Melissa was building her digital smear campaign, my security footage was revealing her real plan. I watched her and two friends exploring my cabin's exterior, testing door handles, peering through windows like they were casing the joint. The audio system I'd installed picked up their conversation clearly. "Perfect spot for the fundraiser party," Melissa said, circulating around my grandfather's porch. "We'll use it while he's out of town for that electrical job. By the time he gets back, we'll have documentation of code violations that'll justify seizure." The mini twist hit me like a lightning bolt. This wasn't just about harassment or even embezzlement. Melissa was planning to manufacture evidence by trespassing on my property, then claim the violations she created justified seizing my cabin for community use. Her real estate company would handle the sale, naturally. My counterpunch required patience and precision. Instead of confronting her directly, I launched my own social media offensive. I created a detailed response video showing the actual condition of my property, complete with timestamps and measurements proving every violation was fabricated. Sandra helped craft legally bulletproof language that exposed Melissa's conflicts of interest without crossing into defamation territory. The key to fighting social media harassment is documentation and factual responses. Never engage emotionally. Always respond with verifiable evidence and let the facts speak for themselves. The takeaway? Digital bullies collapse when faced with systematic truth-telling. The Truth Squad shared my content faster than Melissa could create lies. Carol Winter's inside information helped us stay ahead of each new attack. We learned Melissa planned to declare my cabin abandoned based on unpaid fines from her fake violations, then use a buried clause in the HOA agreement to seize it for community benefit. But I had advantages Melissa didn't know about. My surveillance system was far more sophisticated than she realized, and I wasn't actually planning to leave town for that electrical job. I was going to be watching every move she made, recording every crime she committed, and waiting for the perfect moment to spring the trap. The Truth Squad was buzzing with anticipation as we prepared for what we knew would be the final confrontation. Amy Chen, a local news reporter, and Mr. Chen's daughter, had begun investigating our story. The pattern of corruption was becoming undeniable, and Melissa's empire was about to crumble. The sound of my phone buzzing constantly with supportive messages from neighbors felt like a drumbeat building toward justice. We had transformed from individual victims into a unified force, and Melissa Henderson was about to learn what happens when communities fight back. The smoking gun came from the most unlikely source. Sandra's paralegal, digging through decades of HOA paperwork like an archaeological expedition through bureaucratic hell. Buried in the original 1987 covenant agreement was a clause that made my blood run cold. Emergency Community Assessment Protocol. In plain English, it meant the HOA could seize up to 75% of any property's value for community benefit if they could prove multiple code violations posed an environmental or safety hazard. The property owner would get pennies on the dollar, while the HOA board controlled the resale. Melissa had been building toward this from day one. Every fake violation, every manufactured emergency, every harassment campaign was designed to create the paper trail needed to invoke this nuclear option on my cabin. She'd done her homework and found the one legal mechanism that could steal my grandfather's legacy while making it look legitimate. But Sandra's investigation revealed the real motive. Melissa's real estate company had already identified buyers for my cabin. Wealthy clients looking for a luxury mountain retreat who'd pay 10 times what the HOA assessment would value it at. Brad Henderson's construction company would handle the necessary renovations to bring it up to community standards. Conservative estimate of their profit, $400,000, from my family's 100-year-old property. The timeline was critical. Melissa needed one more major violation to trigger the seizure process, and she planned to create it by trespassing and planting evidence of a health hazard. The fundraiser party she'd discussed wasn't celebration. It was a crime scene in the making. Property seizure laws often contain buried clauses that give HOA boards dangerous powers. Always read your complete covenant agreement and have it reviewed by a property attorney. The takeaway? The most dangerous legal trap is the one you don't know exists. But here's what Melissa didn't know. I'd been 3 steps ahead of her for weeks. My surveillance system covered every approach to the cabin, with motion sensors, audio recording, and cloud storage that would preserve evidence even if they destroyed the equipment. I'd also placed the property in a trust that would complicate any seizure attempt and give us legal standing to fight. The stakes were higher than my personal situation. If Melissa succeeded with my cabin, every property in Pine Valley became a potential target. Elderly residents like Mrs. Patterson would be next, followed by anyone who couldn't afford to fight prolonged legal battles. Our neighborhood would transform from a diverse community into an exclusive enclave for Melissa's wealthy friends. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about the soul of our community, and whether ordinary families had the right to exist in their own homes without fear of manufactured persecution. The trap was set, the evidence was documented, and Melissa Henderson was about to walk into the most expensive mistake of her life. Converting my cabin's back bedroom into a surveillance center felt like preparing for war, and in many ways that's exactly what it was. Multiple camera angles covered every approach, the main road, the hiking trail, even the old logging path most people had forgotten about. Audio recording equipment with 48-hour battery backup ensured we'd capture every whispered conspiracy. My laptop connected to encrypted cloud storage that would preserve evidence even if they burned the place down. Sandra and I spent hours preparing the legal response. Criminal complaint templates for trespassing, breaking and entering, conspiracy to commit fraud, and evidence tampering sat ready for immediate filing. Deputy Martinez, one of the few clean cops in our small town, had agreed to respond personally when we called. The chain of custody protocols were bulletproof. Every piece of evidence would be admissible in court. The technical preparation took weeks. Motion-activated floodlights would illuminate any nighttime activity while sending alerts to my phone. Hidden cameras in every room were perfectly legal on my own property, and backup generators would keep everything running, even if they cut the power. I installed a GPS tracker on my truck to prove I'd left town for that fictional electrical job while actually staying 30 minutes away. When installing surveillance equipment on your own property, check local laws about audio recording. Some states require single-party consent, while others need all parties to agree. The takeaway? Legal surveillance evidence is worthless if it was gathered illegally, so know your state's wiretapping laws. The Truth Squad had evolved into a sophisticated intelligence network. Mrs. Patterson volunteered as communications coordinator, her landline becoming our secure channel when cell towers were unreliable. Carol Winters continued feeding us inside information about Melissa's plans, risking her own position to do what was right. Amy Chen positioned herself for rapid response media coverage, ready to broadcast justice in real time. I'd also prepared financial countermeasures. The property trust would prevent seizure attempts, but I'd also documented every legitimate expense for legal fee recovery. Sandra assured me that successful harassment victims could recover costs, and I planned to use every penny to help other families fight similar abuse. The intelligence Carol provided was gold. Melissa's cleanup party would include 6 people: herself, Brad Henderson, the bribed city inspector, and 3 hired crew members to plant evidence and create violations. Their timeline was Saturday afternoon, when the neighborhood was busy with weekend activities and fewer witnesses would be around. My psychological preparation was just as important as the technical setup. I practiced staying calm during confrontation, rehearsed the exact legal language to use when catching trespassers, and prepared for Melissa's likely accusations and deflections. Sandra coached me on evidence preservation and law enforcement interaction, ensuring nothing would be compromised by emotional reactions. The bait setup was perfect. I'd publicly announced my week-long electrical job in Austin, posted social media about finally getting away from HOA drama, and left the cabin appearing abandoned while every inch remained under surveillance. My truck sat at a hotel parking lot 30 minutes away, ready for rapid response. The community excitement was palpable. Truth Squad members buzzed with anticipation, several planning to accidentally drive by during the incident. Amy Chen's news van was positioned for immediate response. Neighbors began documenting their own HOA violations as evidence of the systematic pattern we'd uncovered. The smell of electrical components and fresh batteries filled my workspace as I completed final equipment checks. The sound of drilling echoed through the cabin as I installed the last hidden camera mounts. My calloused hands tested every connection, ensuring nothing would fail when justice finally arrived. I named the operation Gnome Justice in honor of my controversial lawn ornament that started this whole mess. Melissa Henderson was about to learn that underestimating your opponent is the fastest way to lose everything you've worked to steal. Melissa's desperation reached new heights when she attempted to bribe the city inspector to cite my cabin for code violations. What she didn't know was that Inspector Williams was one of the few honest officials left in our county. He immediately reported the bribe attempt to authorities and provided a sworn statement about Melissa's corruption. She offered me $5,000 cash to find violations that don't exist, Williams told Sandra during our strategy meeting. Then she threatened my job when I refused. This woman's lost all sense of reality. But Melissa wasn't done destroying her own life. While I was supposedly traveling for work, she and Brad attempted to vandalize my main house to create visible violations they could photograph as evidence. They damaged my mailbox, scattered trash across my lawn, and spray-painted my fence with graffiti that looked like gang tags but spelled words incorrectly. All of it was captured in crystal-clear detail by my home security system, including audio of them planning each act of sabotage. Brad's voice was particularly clear as he directed the operation. "Make it look like drug activity. That'll justify the health hazard seizure." The mini twist came through Carol's increasingly frantic reports. Melissa had completely lost touch with reality and was planning to plant actual drugs at my cabin during the invasion. Her idea was to claim I was running an illegal operation, which would justify immediate seizure and add federal charges that would destroy any chance of fighting back. Brad's police friend was supposed to discover the evidence during a raid. My counterpunch was swift and decisive. I contacted the DEA about the planned evidence planting, a federal crime that would bring serious heat down on everyone involved. Sandra coordinated with clean law enforcement to ensure the response would be legitimate and properly documented. Every piece of sabotage at my main house became additional property damage claims that would bankrupt the Henderson family. Evidence tampering and planting are federal crimes. Any attempt should be reported to FBI field offices, not local police who might be compromised. The takeaway? When corruption involves law enforcement, always escalate to federal agencies with jurisdiction. Amy Chen's investigation had uncovered Melissa's pattern in her previous neighborhood. 3 families had been forced to sell their homes under suspicious circumstances, all involving manufactured violations and harassment campaigns. The story was ready to publish once we collected the final evidence, and national HOA abuse websites were eager to feature our case. The community rally was unprecedented. 23 neighbors contributed to a legal defense fund, not just for me but for future victims. A petition to remove Melissa from the HOA board collected signatures faster than we could count them. The city council received formal complaints about Brad Henderson's conflicts of interest, putting his political career in jeopardy. Melissa hired a crisis management consultant to clean up her image, but the damage was too extensive. She created fake online reviews praising her HOA leadership, spread rumors about my mental health and divorce, and each lie created additional defamation lawsuit potential. The woman was digging her own legal grave with every desperate move. The final countdown had begun. 48 hours until the planned cabin invasion, and every system was operational. Legal teams were on high alert, community members were positioned for documentation, and the trap was perfectly set. The sound of Melissa's increasingly frantic voicemails on my phone became a daily reminder of how far she'd fallen. The smell of spray paint from the vandalism at my house lingered as evidence of her desperation. Watching the blurry nighttime footage of figures damaging my property made my jaw muscles tense with controlled anger. But I knew patience would deliver justice more effectively than confrontation. Melissa Henderson had no idea she was about to walk into the most documented crime in Pine Valley history. The final week brought Melissa's most dangerous gambit yet. She filed a fake police report claiming I'd threatened her life, complete with fabricated evidence and coached witnesses. Based on this fiction, she obtained a restraining order that would legally prevent me from approaching my own cabin during her planned invasion. The local news picked up her story. HOA president fears for safety from unstable resident. My business clients received warning calls about my supposed mental instability. It was character assassination, designed to isolate me from community support and provide legal cover for her crimes. But I was ready with the nuclear option. I released a 47-minute compilation video of Melissa's entire harassment campaign, complete with audio recordings, security footage, and documented lies spanning 6 months. The video included her bribe attempts, sabotage planning, and conspiracy discussions captured on my surveillance system. The response was immediate and devastating. The video went viral in HOA abuse communities nationwide, generating hundreds of thousands of views in 24 hours. Legal experts analyzed it on YouTube channels, social media influencers shared it as an example of suburban corruption, and Melissa Henderson became the face of HOA abuse across America. The mini-twist came from an unexpected source. Former residents of Melissa's previous neighborhood who saw the viral video and contacted me directly. They provided documentation of identical harassment patterns, evidence of property seizures under suspicious circumstances, and testimony about systematic targeting of vulnerable residents. We suddenly had a multi-jurisdiction pattern of criminal behavior, spanning 5 years. My counterpunch was coordinated with Sandra, and now included a class action lawsuit representing multiple communities. National HOA reform organizations offered support, legal funding, and expert witnesses. What started as one man's fight against neighborhood harassment had become a federal case study in suburban corruption. False police reports are serious felonies. Maintain detailed documentation and cooperate fully with investigators to expose the lies. The takeaway? Corrupt officials always overreach when they're desperate, and overreach creates the evidence needed to destroy them. Melissa's attempt to have me committed for psychiatric evaluation was her final desperate move. She approached Dr. Stevens with evidence of my dangerous behavior, demanding an involuntary hold that would prevent me from interfering with her cabin seizure. Dr. Stevens reviewed her materials, laughed at their obvious fabrication, and reported the attempt to authorities as harassment of medical professionals. Sandra filed an emergency harassment injunction that legally prevented Melissa from contacting me, my clients, or any medical professionals about my mental state. Every fake accusation became additional evidence in our expanding lawsuit. The community mobilization was complete. Truth Squad members organized Saturday coincidental activities, yard work, dog walks, and errands that would position witnesses throughout the neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson planned a tea party with perfect views of the cabin road. Amy Chen's camera crew would be filming a routine neighborhood story that would capture everything. 18 hours remained until Melissa's planned invasion. All surveillance systems were tested and recording. Legal teams were briefed for immediate response, and the sheriff's department was prepared for multiple felony arrests. The community was ready to witness justice after months of systematic abuse. My steady breathing during final meditation preparations helped calm the anticipation building in my chest. The smell of pine trees around the cabin reminded me why this fight mattered, not just for me, but for every family that deserved to feel safe in their own home. My hands remained steady as I adjusted camera angles one final time. The psychological breaking point had arrived for Melissa Henderson. Her behavior was increasingly erratic. Public embarrassment from the viral video had caused social isolation, and even her own board members were distancing themselves from her leadership. Brad Henderson was considering divorce to protect his political career. Tomorrow would bring the reckoning, 6 months in the making. Saturday, 2:17 p.m. Melissa's white Escalade crested the hill, leading to my cabin, followed by 3 other vehicles in what looked like a criminal convoy. I watched from my hotel room 30 minutes away as 6 people emerged: Melissa, Brad Henderson, the bribed inspector, and 3 hired crew members carrying lock-picking tools and evidence-planting materials. Every second was recorded in high-definition video with crystal-clear audio as they approached my grandfather's cabin like they owned it. Deputy Martinez and backup officers were positioned 5 minutes away, waiting for my signal. Amy Chen's news crew was monitoring police scanners for immediate response. Melissa used professional lockpicks to force my cabin door. The moment trespassing became breaking and entering, a felony upgrade that would guarantee prison time. Brad Henderson directed the placement of fake evidence around the property, while the inspector created violation reports for problems that didn't exist. The audio system captured detailed confessions of their entire conspiracy. "Plant the drugs near the electrical panel," Melissa instructed. "Make it look like he's running a lab. Williams, you document everything as pre-existing violations. This has to look legitimate." Inspector Williams, apparently, had been replaced by a corrupt substitute who'd taken Melissa's money. The real Williams was safe at home. ready to testify about the bribe attempts and impersonation. I timed my arrival perfectly, rolling up just as they were placing the final pieces of fabricated evidence. Deputy Martinez and 2 backup officers followed immediately, catching the entire crew red-handed with planted materials and burglary tools. Phrase, Pine Valley Sheriff's Department. The look on Melissa's face when she realized she'd been completely outmaneuvered was worth every month of harassment I'd endured. She tried claiming they were conducting an authorized inspection, but I presented documentation proving the cabin was outside HOA jurisdiction and played audio recordings of them planning the entire conspiracy. "You can't use those recordings," Melissa screamed as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "This is entrapment." "Ma'am, this is called evidence," Deputy Martinez replied calmly. "You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you use it." Brad Henderson was arrested for conspiracy and evidence tampering. The fake inspector faced federal charges for impersonating a public official and taking bribes. Melissa got the full treatment: breaking and entering, trespassing, fraud, conspiracy, and evidence tampering. All of this was broadcast live on Amy Chen's news stream, watched by thousands of viewers as justice finally arrived in Pine Valley. The Truth Squad provided running commentary from multiple angles, Mrs. Patterson's voice clear and proud as she narrated Melissa's downfall for social media. The evidence reveal was devastating. 47 hours of surveillance footage, financial records showing embezzlement patterns, testimony from harassment victims in 3 neighborhoods, and documented proof of systematic corruption. The case file was thick enough to guarantee convictions on multiple felony charges. Melissa's public breakdown was complete. She screamed accusations at me while being loaded into the patrol car, claimed she was protecting property values and community standards, blamed everyone else for her criminal choices. The dignified response from community members who'd suffered under her reign exposed her true character to the world. Amy Chen's exclusive coverage was picked up by national networks within hours. The HOA abuse story became a primetime feature on 3 major news programs. Legal experts analyzed the case for criminal justice reform. Pine Valley became a symbol of community resistance to suburban corruption. As Melissa's Escalade was towed away as evidence, I addressed the assembled crowd and cameras with the mic drop moment this story deserved. This is what happens when communities stand together against corruption. Every family deserves to feel safe in their own home. Bullies only win when good people stay silent. And we refuse to stay silent. The applause echoed through the pine trees as justice finally came home. 6 months later, justice had been served with interest. Melissa Henderson received 18 months in federal prison plus $45,000 in restitution to her victims. Brad Henderson lost his city council seat and faced civil lawsuits that would bankrupt him for years. The fake inspector lost his license and joined Melissa behind bars on federal corruption charges. All 3 were permanently banned from HOA involvement statewide. Our community healing began immediately. The new HOA board, elected with a transparency mandate, reduced monthly fees by 40% after eliminating the corruption tax we'd all been paying. Open book financial management became standard practice, and we created a resident ombudsman position for future dispute resolution. Pine Valley experienced a renaissance. Property values increased due to our improved reputation for honest governance. 15 new families moved in, attracted by reformed leadership and community accountability. The Truth Squad became a permanent community watch organization, and we're now a national model for HOA accountability and resident rights. My personal victory was sweeter than I'd imagined. The cabin was restored to its peaceful retreat status, legal fees were fully recovered through settlements, and my grandfather's legacy was preserved for future generations. But more importantly, I'd found new purpose as a community advocate and legal reform speaker. The ripple effect amazed everyone. My story inspired HOA reform legislation in 12 states. We established legal precedent for harassment victims nationwide. The National HOA Accountability website featured our case as a template for fighting corruption. A documentary film crew is planning a full-length feature about suburban justice. Financial recovery exceeded our wildest expectations. We recovered $127,000 from the embezzlement scheme and used it to establish a community improvement fund. Mrs. Patterson and other victims received full restitution. Our legal victory created a template that's helped hundreds of families fight similar abuse. The community initiatives we launched became our lasting legacy. The annual Pine Valley Freedom Festival celebrates our victory over corruption while raising money for legal advocacy education. We established a scholarship fund for students pursuing law degrees with focus on property rights. The Community Garden Project transformed former violation sites into spaces that bring neighbors together. The statistics tell the real story of our impact. Through the advocacy network we created, 847 families have received help fighting HOA abuse. We've recovered $2.3 million in fraudulent fees nationwide. 23 corrupt board members have been removed from power, and zero tolerance for harassment is now standard practice in reformed communities. The smell of barbecue from our community celebrations reminds me how much has changed. The sound of children playing safely in our reformed neighborhood proves that ordinary people can defeat extraordinary corruption. The warm handshakes from grateful neighbors, the texture of thank you letters from families across the country, these are the rewards that matter most. My grandfather's cabin stands proud and protected, overlooking a community that learned to fight for itself. I found love again with a fellow community advocate I met at a reform conference. My consulting business helps HOA abuse victims nationwide, and I speak at legal seminars about surveillance evidence techniques. The book I wrote, Standing Ground: How One Community Defeated Corruption, became a bestseller in legal advocacy circles. Pine Valley is now a training ground for community organizers. Law schools study our case for property rights education, and the HOA industry implemented voluntary reform standards because of our victory. Sometimes the little guy wins when he refuses to back down. Your voice matters, your rights matter, and your community matters. Evil prospers when good people do nothing. But we did something, and it changed everything. Now it's your turn. Share your HOA nightmare stories in the comments below. I read every single one and respond when I can. Subscribe for more community justice stories and ring that notification bell if you believe in standing up to bullies. Next week, I'm sharing how I exposed my former landlord's illegal rental empire that stole deposits from hundreds of tenants. Remember, justice delayed is not justice denied when good people work together. Welcome to the resistance.